What's up, guys? I'm Saniqua.
I'm Ashley.
And I'm Nikisha.
And we are your hosts of Coffee and Chat.
So today we have coffee mugs brought to you from Punta Cana. Our dear Saniqua right here just went on an amazing vacation, and she brought these back to us as a gift. So awesome. And eventually she's going to tell us the amazing story about the coffee bean and everything over there.
We are so excited. This is our second show. Last week we talked to you guys about being woman and what that journey looked like for us. And so this week we're talking about vulnerability. A subject that makes people uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Something that makes people afraid. And so we want to share with you guys what's on our heart and just invite you into what God is doing and what He's going to do. So I'm going to ask the ladies a question. When you ladies think about vulnerability or being vulnerable, what comes to mind? And how has vulnerability looked for the past years or in the past years for you guys?
For me, being vulnerable definitely has had many facets in my life, and it's definitely pretty much been the fabric that has woven me together. Just being vulnerable overall taps you into who you are at the core of you. And so I would first have to say, Ash, self-vulnerability, and what that looks like to me is answering those hard questions about yourself and being honest with yourself, being naked with yourself, of course, and God also being present, you know what I mean, because sometimes there's some real dark stuff that's coming up, and if you don't have the power and the presence of God to be there to apply salve or healing to that, you can do some real dangerous stuff. Also, it can be a gateway for the enemy to come in and really tear your life up, kind of, sort of. So being vulnerable with self is very important, and it's very important to invite the Holy Spirit in while you are having those times. I can remember I probably was like maybe 25, without telling my age too much. And one day I just got in the tub, and I just began to speak. I was sitting in the tub, and I just began to speak to the water. And I know that sounds really crazy, but all the negative things I had been dealing with, the things I was afraid to tell other people, I just began to speak to myself, but to the water. And after I was done, I let that, the stopper in the tub go up, and it was like a cleansing, like those things to never return to me again, that God will really wash me and cleanse me. And I had to apologize to self. I had to forgive myself for some of the mistakes that I had made. And that was like no other. Once I was able to do that and be vulnerable with myself, being vulnerable with other people became very easy. There was a lot of times I had to apologize to people, and I didn't want to, but that opened up a gateway to be vulnerable with them. And then just here lately, my vulnerability has been with my children. And I think as parents, as mothers, it is so important for us to express to our children where we've been. My daughter's only 2 years old, but I have a niece who's Michaela's 12. I have a bonus baby who is 11, and being vulnerable about my past mistakes, about my just dealings in life, my childhood. I don't try to hide it. I don't try to cover it up and make it seem as though I'm just this perfect, put together person. But being vulnerable with them, getting on their level, speaking to them directly to the place that they are in life. And allowing them to grow from there, allowing them to grow from my mistakes. And then finally, the biggest vulnerable place I think that I have been, besides with self, is in marriage. And being vulnerable in marriage has really allowed me to see who I am from a different perspective.
To be honest, the first thing that comes to mind when I hear vulnerability is definitely marriage, for a few different layers. One is because, as a Christian, I'm called to be a part of the bride of Christ. And to know God as a bridegroom is a very intimate, vulnerable place where he comes and he digs up some stuff that you didn't know was there anymore. You hear from yourself, you hear from the world and everything else. And that's actually an area in life that I find myself in even right now, where the Lord is dealing with some stuff that's like childhood that I was like, why are we even touching that? It's been so long. And he's not willing to allow me to just cover things up. There's no sweeping things under the rug with the Lord. So that has that's been the biggest part. But my actual marriage to my husband, my earthly bridegroom, has definitely showed me Christ and his ways in that. Because, when you tie yourself to another person, like literally become one with a person, you start to learn stuff about yourself that you didn't even know. You really think that you know yourself, but it's like, until you have to share your everything that makes you with a whole nother person, it's like, okay. Because even like Sadiqa was talking about, it's easy to hide stuff from yourself or try to bury stuff, because if nobody else knows it, why do I have to deal with it?
Absolutely.
Like nobody knows what's going on in my life. So as long as I could continue to just cover things up and go as nothing has changed, then it's all good. But when you have a husband, that just doesn't fly. It just doesn't. One is because they want just honesty and truth and real intimacy with you, and they deserve that, if you committed yourself to them. And then secondly, when you actually have a soul tie, the things that affect you affect them too. So becoming vulnerable with my husband it's definitely been a journey. The biggest reason is because before being married, I had never been in a very intimate relationship. And when I say intimate, I think of the mind space. I think of the actual emotional and spiritual space. I'm not talking about this sexual, like the physical. That's surface level, to be real, But I never had a man who was really willing to figure out all that I had to bring to the table, who was really willing to cultivate, and be a real gardener. And that's exactly what he is in my life. And if that's the case, he also has to pull up those weeds, and he also has to water. And there's some real beautiful parts to the garden, but there's some real ugly, there's some real ugly parts, but if a good gardener doesn't let you see the ugly parts, so that's the beautiful thing too. My husband can sit there and dig up those things, and we can be vulnerable. But nobody else has to know that that's there. I have him to share that stuff with, to be, really open with. And I thank God.
Thank God.
I truly thank God, because I'm finding out day by day that I am a mess. Okay? A hot mess, which I think we all would probably say that about ourselves.
Not by yourself. Not by yourself.
That you're a mess. And it makes me even thank God even more for the fact that, this man said yes.
He said he picked me.
He picked me. He wanted all of this. That journey is really real, and it's still evolving. And I believe that it will always be evolving. I hear people that's been married for years, and they're just like, we're still growing together. Like those midlife crises is real. That means things are still coming up when people have those issues. But by the grace of God, it ain't gonna be no crisis. It'll be Christ is.
Hello?
Come on. Okay, he's Lord. But so Ashley, what's up with you?
She wiped me out on that one. This is what I love about being at the table. But vulnerability to me, when I think of it, I can remember prior to being married, just the anxieties and the fears that would come up when you even mention the word vulnerable, because it wasn't something that I did. It wasn't even really a part of my vocabulary other than like like a blanket kind of statement that I knew that I wasn't going to hit, if that makes sense. Like it was something to sound good. And so prior to marriage, I really didn't have to deal with being vulnerable because I wore a mask. And so I was always the go-to person. Like if you had something to talk about, if you wanted to, you know, spill all of your guts out where you are.
Spill all the beans.
Right, spill all the beans wherever you were in life. You know, I was the go-to person, and I was going to hold your secrets, and I was going to listen to you and counsel you and even tell you where I've been and what I've come through in life. But for you to come into that space of mind, deep into the core, as Tanika was talking about, or even to my heart and really my mind, because I'm very protective of my mind personally, because just, you know, it's just a real vulnerable space, you know, to be able to share your secrets, the things that you're thinking about 24/7, because it's not always God, the things that, the ideas that you have fluctuating, just all these things that can come to mind. And that was a place that was off guards to everybody for, I think for my entire life up until maybe 2012. And that was when I began to be in a relationship with a friend, like just having a friend that was a covenant friend and who actually had the same like mind struggles that I had as far as just spiritual. And we were able to open up to one another and just really be vulnerable and say, hey, these are things that come to my mind. And we would pray for one another, and we would fast together, and we would hold each other up and hold each other accountable. And so a lot of those nerves and fears went away, but at the same time, they prepared me. Like those conversations with her in that place prepared me for marriage, prepared me to be vulnerable with my husband, because at that moment I learned that I could trust. And so I was no longer having this whole macho woman or superhero just mentality, but it was like, you can be okay with coming away from the mask, you know, inviting people into your inner part. And that's what I wanted to hit on. As far as vulnerability, I knew how to be transparent. I knew how to say, yeah, this is what I've been through. I used to smoke. I used to drink. I used to club. I used to. And, but I would never allow people to know my weaknesses and my brokenness that I was dealing with in the moment. And I'm still working on it. I think my husband is definitely the one that gets the most of it, because I can go through things and he's not allowing me just to sulk in my misery or even to be down. We call our house the Grand House of Prayer, you know, so that means worship and prayer is going on 24/7. We're in the dialogue with each other and with the Lord all the time. And so with that, he allows me to be comfortable, you know, but it's still like, but I don't want to, you know, especially when you see somebody like executing their goals or whatever their spiritual goals or natural goals, it's hard to be like, I've been struggling with uncleanness for years. You know, it was just, say yesterday that I was at church and was just reading about the works of the flesh, and uncleanness was one of them. And this is something I've been talking to the Lord about. I'm being vulnerable with y'all right now. I've been talking to the Lord about, like, Lord, you know, I want to be clean inside and out. And so just seen that in the Bible. I had never seen uncleanliness. Like, I heard cleanliness is next to godliness and all of these different things that people say, but I'm like, Lord, that's not going to keep me. I need your word to keep me. And he highlighted uncleanness as a work of the flesh in Galatians, and it just like sparked up in me this revelation. I was like, thank you, God, because now I feel like you're with me. Like, as I go in and do, you know, just even cleaning around the house and being able to clean my temple on the inside. You know, there's just a lot of things on the inside that need to be uprooted, as Kiki was talking about, the gardener. And so I feel like my friendships and my relationships have definitely helped me to be vulnerable with those things. And so it says, hey, this is where I'm at, and I'm inviting you into where I'm at, and do you have any advice? And so my friends have met me with so much advice about, scheduling and different things that I can do. And don't get me wrong, I'm not just filthy dirty, but hey, there are some filthy dirty parts, but I'm just talking about for real. Those moments that you don't want to wake up and clean up nothing, and the laundry piles up for months, and you just don't, the dishes are like, what's up? You know what I'm saying? I'm not, and, is anybody going to eat? No, we're going to order out. Just those moments, and you feel insecure about that stuff because people have taught you how to be a good wife, and, just those challenges. So,
where do you guys think vulnerability, the fear of being vulnerable, I should say, comes from? You know what I mean? Like, as I'm listening to you guys speak, I'm like, where did this all, it's like triggering something in me that's saying, where did vulnerability or not wanting to be vulnerable with people come from? Because I think about my own child, I'm like, I don't want her to get to a place in life where she feels as though, or he feels, my son feels, that they are not able to be vulnerable about the things that they are doing or thinking or, want advice about. So where do you guys think the fear of being vulnerable?
Tap in on that one.
Okay.
When you first said it, I think the first thing that came to my mind was one, not seeing it, because I grew up in a single mother household. So anything that was going on that dealt with the family as a whole, like my mother only had herself. So she had to deal with that, and of course, as any good mother, you're going to feel like, I don't want to put this on my children, so of course I'm not going to share with them that I only have $1, and we need food, or we need something, you get what I'm saying, or or that mommy's actually not doing well in her health, but I don't want to scare them, so I can't, share them, and she doesn't, obviously she didn't have a husband, so there's no, you don't see that. And even as in a marriage, of course, the children, of course, don't necessarily see y'all have these deep, dark, conversations, but they know that communication is taking place. They see it in other areas and other aspects. As well with that, I would say, as a young girl, I think sometimes certain areas that were deemed as more taboo, there was a fear of vulnerability because you don't want parents to be disappointed with you. You don't want to get in trouble. Like, of course, about certain things. And that's one thing the Lord has really had on my heart to make sure, as it pertains to my young daughter, our children, that she doesn't never have a fear to come to me about certain things. Like one thing I can think of just right out, and I'm just gonna be all the way real as a young woman, is that like having a sexual desire. And if those things are never talked about in your house, and you just go past like it's not gonna happen, you're really setting yourself up for some stuff. Like we've all literally are created to desire pleasure. And we don't want to talk about that in the church for real. Like we're like, oh no, like it's a no. But if nobody knows, but if you're not teaching your children why it's a no before marriage, then how are they even understanding that? Like, I don't even remember really having that conversation, to be honest, with my mom. Not until maybe a little later, and she thought something was going on. And then it was like, oh well, maybe talk to her, but those conversations should have been started beforehand. And I do think it's the parents' job to open up and be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Me and my mother didn't even get to the point of vulnerability until I actually got saved. And once I surrendered my life, I realized I had some issues with my mother and my parents. I just really had some resentment that I needed to deal with. And I sat her down to have a conversation with her and tell her some things that she didn't know happened to me as a child. It's some things that I had dealt with. And from there, it just like sparked this whole tear fest. We all do. We're just like, we're just gonna let it all out, And I bless God for that moment. But it even showed me in that my mother herself was just a broken little girl too. And she didn't know how to parent me, especially since she wasn't living for Christ. She had no example. She didn't really know what to do herself. So. It was a lot of healing that took place, but basically I do think that the parents should initiate that with their marriage, with conversations, and open the kids into that space to be vulnerable, and even like you said, to be willing to even apologize.
What came to my mind when you asked that was, what goes on in my house stays in my house.
Yes,
and I don't know how many people was brought up like that, but it was not knowing. I'm sure it was done in innocence, and even in what our parents have seen go on and throughout their childhood or their lives just kind of passed down, but causing us to not what goes on in your house. You know what I'm saying? Inside of you, not just the house building, but this is our house, this is our temple, stays here. And so if it stays here, whether it's dark and it's ugly, then it's going to deteriorate and it's going to start infecting everything that's on the inside. It's going to start eating away. And so if you don't have an outlet for that, then that is the actual result. And I feel like I said, that's what came up when you said it. So I feel like that fear, that shame of what people are going to think.
Shame.
How are people going to think about me? What are people going to say about me? If I tell this that's going on, because we talk about molestation. If I tell somebody that I've been molested, how are they going to look at me? Then how are they going to look at the other person?
Absolutely.
And so that's where that fear of is, don't tell anybody that I've done this to you, And so I don't have all the answers, but I know that that's something that is being worked out in my own heart, in my own life. And I just told the Lord, I was writing the other day, like, what goes on in my house stays in my house, does not apply in my house. And so that's something that I'm sticking with, a part of my own personal household with my husband and my son, and as well as my temple.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, totally agree. But when I'm thinking, the first time I was really, really vulnerable with my mother, I made her turn the lights out. I know this sounds so crazy, but I was like, Mom, I can't speak to this issue. I can't speak to it with the lights on because, And I remember coming home, I remember sitting her down, and I remember, the lights had to be out. And we sat in the front room, and I just kind of gave it all to her. And the thing is that there were times I walked her through times in my life where I wanted to be vulnerable with her, but I was so afraid that her reaction was going to be way over the top. You know what I mean? And the enemy constantly plagued my mind with fear of, if you divulge all this, somebody may commit suicide. It'll be all your fault. Jesus. You know what I mean? Just so crazy. But the second time I was very vulnerable. Well, my mother actually was vulnerable with us. Was in the room wasn't dark, but it was a very dark place in one of my siblings' lives, and my mom just sat there and said, I'm sorry, I'm not the mom you want me to be. And I was like, what? And that was the first, because, my mom, her vulnerable, we talked about parents and that sort of thing. I never really seen my mom cry. When I tell you, Mom, actually, they say men cry in the dark, well, my mom cries in the tub. Okay? By herself. You know what I mean? The times that she's been that made me cry. I'm like, what? Your tears? But no, she's like, no, she cries in her space. You know what I mean? And I was like, hey, okay. So when in my mind, the secret place, I was like, so when it's time for those type of things, it needs to be alone. You know what I mean? That's probably why when I was talking about speaking in that tub to the water is because that was my introduction to vulnerability. You know what I mean? And so, Kiki, I would like for you to speak to the biggest challenges, and you may have already kind of touched this, but the biggest challenges that vulnerability brings to your life.
I touched it a little bit when I was telling you that even right now, the Lord is scratching the surface of some things that He wants to deal with my childhood. And that's been hard because no one outwardly wants to tell God no. But to be real, that's how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
Don't you do that. That's not right. That's not fair. Fair. But that word. But like lately I'll be honest with y'all, I haven't really surrendered it all, so keep me lifted.
Yeah.
But I've been training myself to like trying to train myself as to what's going to come up, which I know is silly because it's like just like you don't know it's there obviously like he's trying to dig it up,
Right.
but even training myself, like just preparing myself to really sit on the operating table and allow God to do it, because at the end of the day, God's not exposing something because he wants to make me out as this bad person, or bring shame, because he doesn't do that. He's exposing the matter because he wants to heal it. He wants to clear it up and clean it up. The thing is, exposure to a infected area means there's an operating table that has to come. Like there's some real surgery that has to be had. He has to uproot, clean that stuff out, and nobody wants to go through that. Like nobody goes into the doctor's office like, yep, so I think something's wrong and we need to go to the operating room.
Gotta be open.
So you want to hear that good news, like, oh, it's not that bad, And so with all that being said, that's been hard to just really lean on the Lord and all that, just knowing that and the crazy thing is, I'm telling you, like, in my mind space, I can tell you that he's great, he's good, he's going to heal it, he's going to, he wants to do great things, he wants to bring me past it, but I'm just like, it's going to hurt, like, I'm afraid to hurt, like, I thought I dealt with so many things already, to let y'all in a little bit, there's a part of my childhood that I don't remember, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, I literally have no memory of it for about a few years. In my early childhood, and no more middle childhood, and God one day told me, that I suppressed this for so long, and he wants to deal with it, and I was just like, not today, so that's right, so that's that part. Another challenge has been with my peers, to be honest, specifically. I would say specifically women now, but it's probably been my peers all together, women and men. I don't say men now because, of course, like, I don't really have any other men to be vulnerable with but my husband. But women specifically, I realized that I'm very transparent. Like, I'll tell you all day long my testimony. Like, I ain't got no shame in my game. God's brought me a long way, and I'm excited to tell you. Like, look, I'm an overcomer. So, overcomer. So I'd be really happy to tell you that, and I'm actually pretty transparent at moments of telling you what I'm actually going through. But when I say that I struggle with being vulnerable, is that I might actually give you a snippet of what's going on, but you start trying to actually dig into that space with me, I'm kind of like, I ain't asked for that. And it's just kind of been, and it hasn't been on purpose that I've been kind of like not letting people in. I just realized that I haven't really been intentional with like having these deep, meaningful relationships with women in my life. There's parts that I'll share with somebody and parts with maybe another, but there's really not too many people that really know the ins and outs, of me. And that's actually another season I'm in right now, So if you want to be my best friend, you can audition at
Coffee and Chat.
Just kidding. But
if there were some advice you can give to us and the ladies about how to help someone become vulnerable with you, what would you say?
Well, first, I definitely feel like we wore floral today.
Hey.
But as you guys are talking, all I can think about is flowers. And I can think about a lot of times as women, we want to show the beauty. I want to show the beauty and the flower reaching its full potential in all its glory. But I don't want to talk about underneath the surface, underneath that soil, watching that, whether the seed planted, positive or negative, and when it's blooming, when it's coming up, those weeds that are there, I don't want to really go deep there. So to have other people to be vulnerable with you in that dark space again, is to first invite them in to your dark space. You know what I mean? The Bible says, in order to have a friend, you must first show yourself friendly. Yeah. So in order to, really allow people, or for people to trust you enough to be vulnerable with you, you have to first be willing to be vulnerable with them. And to say, here is the places in which I struggle, my past, and being very, very intentional about the conversation, as Kiki was saying earlier, that you're having with them, allowing them to see the true you. And even with women, a lot of times, because we have, for the most part, poor examples of the relationships from one woman to another. A lot of times there's a lot of jealousy and there's a lot of envy. There's a lot of competition that goes there. You don't want to show them. But there's so much beauty in somebody being able to see your mistakes. There's so much beauty in recognizing that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you are an individual. There is no one in the earth like you. There's nobody who may wear your same shoe size, may have the same shoe, but they have not walked the same walk that you walk. And so being able to let them know, like, hey,
what's here?
Being able to let them know, this is where I'm at. This is, here's my honesty. Here's my bare naked truth. Here's my my raw and uncut self. And this, I'm not perfect. A lot of times the image of perfection steers us away a lot of time, action and wanting to present ourselves, and not that we shouldn't, but you have to show and let people know that there's imperfections that lie within you, that you're still being, God is still doing a perfect work within you. He's constantly working those things out. I think once you're able to be vulnerable with self, and then you're allowing other people to step into your vulnerable space, people will feel like, hey, you know what? I probably can share with her. I probably can talk to her. I probably can, really express who I am. And then also, when people are giving you information, to hold it to your heart, and not to share it, not to gossip it, because you do more damage to the person. You push them further away from being vulnerable. When you share to everyone about what's going on, or to anyone. I think men, I know my husband does an incredible job.
Mine too.
When somebody tells him something, boy, I be like, you ain't even gonna tell me. Because he said, tell no one. I'm like,
that's a whole nother show.
That's
another show.
We're actually one. Like, what you
we're
mean?
one. And he's like, but this one was not for you. You know what I mean? Like, he just keeps, my dad is a vault also. If I want to, really like get some stuff out, like, and then also too, as Black women, as African Americans, period, I think we don't do a good job of, we keep that close to us, staying. What happens in our home stays in our home, but we never really go get counseled, godly counsel, with other people, you know what I mean? People inside the church. There's safety in a multitude of counselors, you know what I mean? I think we kind of forget that piece, but to go out and really talk to some people, you know what I mean, about those things that's going on. But
I also think comparison steals the joy of being vulnerable to it.
Like
if you're comparing yourself to your sister, you don't want them to know that you're dealing with something, because you see in them as, really high in that area. And lo and behold, they're probably dealing with the same stuff, but ain't nobody talking.
That's good.
But with that being said, Ashley, how would you say you've benefited from being vulnerable with people?
That's really good, because I have been listening to both of you, and I just want to kind of compile it all, because one, I believe that I benefited especially this year, I set a goal, and my word for the year was accountability. And that I wanted to be held accountable. And how else can you be held accountable unless you let somebody into your weaknesses and your brokenness and even the goals that you have? Because until this year, had a problem hitting goals. And I would run after them and I would stop. And then because I was not sharing it with anybody, it was okay. Nobody knew. But I started putting these things out here like, hey, I want to write a book. Hey, I want to do this. Hey, I'm going to do this. And I start telling my friends and they're like, hey, so how's that book going? So why are you not writing again? Or, hey, how's, that small group that you were talking about doing? How's that going? And it caused you, it's a healthy drive, if I can say that. And so it has benefited in that way, but also just as Nikisha was just saying, as far as the comparison and even the stealing the joy, when I think about in my friendships, I feel like I have awesome friends. The Lord has covered me and given me some awesome friends. And these two, she's been lifelong and she's been around for almost 7 years. We rocking. But but in these two and even a lot of other ones. And I feel like with that, when you see the strength, I could think of, I have one of my sisters that come to mind right now, and I just adore her. I admire the way she just does life, you know, in motherhood, in marriage, and everything. And I'm like, how do you, what planets are you from, But it's the grace of God, and it's the goodness of God. But I love it when I talk to her just face to face on the phone, and we're both talking about our weaknesses, and we're both talking about the things that we're not good at, and she's able to, it says in a word that two are better than one. For when one falls, then the other can pick them up. And so I find myself in that fallen place, that weak place sometimes, but because she has that strength that I'm admiring, she can pick me up with that strength. And she can also mentor me and cultivate me and admonish me, in that thing. So my weakness becomes my strength, and so I feel like those are those ways that I benefit. It's like, it's hard. It's like stripping yourself and being like, bruh, I suck. You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought I was good, but I'm not, and this is just how I talk to myself and my friends. But really, like, just having those moments, and even what Sanika was sharing as far as being able to hold things and not gossip, and just being able to invite people in to that dark place of your own. I feel like my friendships have been so beneficial in that. I know that when I tell them something, they keep it, and not only do they keep it, but they take it to the Lord. So that's your one outlet that you have. When somebody tell you something, that's take it to the Lord. And for them to come back and give me a word of the Lord, because there are sometimes, in being vulnerable, there's sometimes, as Nikisha said, there's some things that God, I don't really feel confident in going to the Lord about. And that is a place that He doesn't desire us to be, but He's patient with us when we're there. And so being able to join my friend in the conversation and allow them to pray with me and pray for me and being able to trust them to release the word of the Lord and to take it and apply it. So those are the ways that I benefit from being vulnerable, and it has helped me tremendously. And I have hit major goals this year. Y'all hear about it, but I have hit some goals.
I'm trying to be like you when I grow up.
I'm trying to be like somebody. The image of Christ.
Amen.
But no, for real. So accountability and vulnerability has helped me a lot.
That's awesome. Well, as you can see, your cup of the day has been vulnerability.
Right.
But we also want to fill your cup today. So
yes.
That segment of the show, Fill Your Cup, is really us just giving you encouragements and resources that we have to help you with what we talked about on vulnerability. The first one I just want to share is from what Ashley said, is that we need each other.
Yes.
don't be an island to yourself. Like, that's destructive.
Yes.
So you truly need the body of Christ to get through anything. Community is so important. Iron can't sharpen iron if the iron is not near each other. Like, there's no way you can actually do that.
Yeah.
So make sure that you make attempts to actually be around your brothers and sisters. Like, fellowship is actually a rite of passage. Like, that's a part of the gospel, to actually be with one another and doing life with one another.
Absolutely.
You know, we're not all strong in every area, and that's by design.
If I could admonish you or encourage you in any way, I would just say stay in the dialogue with people, with your husbands if you're married, and with the Lord, because there are things that He wants to do through you and for you, but He has to be able to come into those dark places. I just think about Him in the Songs of Solomon, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine, and how He is literally talking to the woman and she feels like, I'm dark, but He comes back like, but you're lovely, you know, and she's like the curtains of Kedar, you know, and He's like, but no, like, you know, and it's like the delight and the desire that God has towards us. He's so excited to talk to you about those deep, dark secrets. He's so excited to tell you where He was, you know, when you were hurt or when you were fractured, and, you know, He's so excited to heal you. And so I know I feel the Holy Ghost. And so I would just encourage you to stay in a dialogue. One of my good friends told me, no, if nobody else can understand your emotions, God can. And so you can tell Him, Dad, I'm mad, I'm frustrated. God, I want to kick in somebody's whole wall. You know, you can say those things and He will say something back to you. Absolutely. And when you exit out that conversation, you feel so much stronger in the Lord, because He's going to tell you how to deal with everything you talked about and how to deal with your anger, you know, and it's going to be best for everybody. So I would encourage you guys to stay in a dialogue with the Lord.
He is not intimidated.
Absolutely. And for me, those women who are not ready, you just feel like, you know, I hear y'all, that sounds all good, but I don't think nobody's ready to deal with the stuff I've been through. Get you a journal. You know what I mean? Right, get you a journal and just jot it down. Just write it down. I mean, to your heart's content, whenever it comes up, whenever you feel hurt, you feel lonely, you feel destructive, you feel pain, write it down. And as you continue to write it and continue to write it down, the beautiful thing about journaling is a lot of times your friends, they're going through life as well, and they may forget. But that journal is holding those thoughts. And so when the brighter day comes, when God has stepped in that place and healed that place and really done a mighty work in you, you can go back and be like, man, I remember when I was broken. I remember when I was hurt. Oh my gosh, it's like, you know, for me, songs do it a lot. And I'm like, you know what? When I listen to that song, I don't feel that way no more. Jesus, you didn't don't pass me by. But then I'm like, hey, you know what? I can play the next song.
No, for real.
I can go to the next because I have to repeat and repeat. But write it down. And then when you see the healing that has taken place in your life, because sometimes the enemy tries to tell us that we haven't taken a step forward. But when you look back in that journal, you're like, oh, well, when I was battling suicide and I'm still here.
Right.
Yeah. When I was really dealing with these this darkness and this sexual immorality, and I have made it past this. I'm here right now. I am in holiness. I am whole. I'm a greater mother. You know what I mean? I ain't going off on my kids no more. You know what I mean? I stepped into some patience. It's like, wow. You know what I mean? You are able, and then in that, right in that, you're like, God, I bless you and I glorify you, and I'm able to share, and now you're able to share that testimony, and then because life, don't you think, sis? As we got knocked down once, that there won't be another issue that's going to come up. But in that time, you can say, you know what? I remember such and such went through that. Maybe I can share with her.
Yeah,
You know, maybe she can help me. Maybe she can lead me. I would still journal, but
Or
she
the
can help
same
me.
thing trying to knock at your door again. You like,
I
I didn't
that's
went
right.
through this before.
Right.
Don't you
Journal
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're able to overcome. You know what I mean? We are overcome by the blood of the Lamb. So I'm so excited. I'm so excited to hear from you guys
Yes.
about you guys trying out either the journal or being vulnerable with one another.
Yeah, this was definitely awesome.
Yes.
And I'm just so elated to be at the table with
Yes.
these awesome women and just to glean from them and to just hear what God is sharing. But we want to thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week. Boom, boom, boom. Coffee and chat.